In the previous lesson, I introduced to you the concept of a string, which is basically text. It is alphanumeric characters. In this lesson, I want to really highlight and dive deeper into the fact that strings and numbers are very different beasts. Now, yes, obviously words and numbers are different, but the differences between strings and numbers really go deeper than that. And what I'm going to show you now is a subtle and nuanced lesson, but really, really important because it highlights that strings and numbers are completely different kinds of objects, completely different kinds of data with completely different kinds of capabilities. So as you know, if we were to type in puts 2 plus 2 and run this code, we would get 4 to the terminal because Ruby computes. It adds the two numbers together. It says 2 plus 2 is 4. We're going to take that result and display it in the terminal, which is exactly what happens. As we demonstrated in the previous lesson, we can also quote-unquote add strings together. The official term is concatenation. But if we concatenate AB plus CD and print that in the terminal, we get ABCD as one string displayed in the terminal. But what if we do this? So if you look carefully, we are concatenating two strings together. Now here, the text contained within the strings just happen to be numbers. It is a two string concatenated with another two string. So the question is, what will happen when we run this code? And this will highlight the true difference, or a true difference, between strings and numbers. As you can see, when we run the code, we get 22 in the terminal. And that is because strings and numbers behave differently in Ruby. When you add strings together, Ruby treats it as text. It treats it as if they were letters or any alphanumeric characters. Ruby doesn't care about the fact that it's a number 2 that is contained within a string. To Ruby, ABC in a string is the same as 2 in a string, and therefore, when it concatenates the 2 string with another 2 string, it basically says, okay, that's the equivalent as concatenating an A string plus a B string. And just as when we concatenate A and B together, we get AB. So when we concatenate a 2 string with another 2 string together, we get 2, 2. Ruby does not recognize the fact that it happens to be numbers. So strings are a truly different beast than numbers. Strings represent pure good old text. Sometimes the text may contain numbers. Sometimes the text may contain other special characters. But the point is that this really highlights the difference between strings and numbers. They represent two different kinds of data entirely and have two sets of distinct behaviors. One way to also highlight this is that if we use the p command rather than the puts command, let's look at the difference between adding a 2 string plus a 2 string as we're doing on line 1 versus adding the numbers 2 plus 2. Remember that when you use the p command and you print a string, it actually prints the string with quotes. So as you can see in the terminal, when we first print the 2 string plus the 2 string, we get 2, 2 in quotation marks because basically Ruby is saying this is a string that I am printing to the terminal. Whereas on the second line, where we print the numbers 2 plus 2 together, we get 4, which is not surrounded by quotation marks because here Ruby is printing a number to the terminal. So first Ruby prints a string to the terminal, and then Ruby prints a number to the terminal. So again, strings and numbers are just very different things. One final demonstration about how strings and numbers behave differently is that I'm going to go ahead and reverse the order of these lines to demonstrate this a little better. As you know, we can subtract in Ruby. So when we print 2 minus 2, we would expect to get 0 to the terminal. What happens, however, when we try to subtract one string from another string? Let's see what happens. So as you can see in the terminal, we do indeed first get a 0, which is the result of running line 1. So first, again, Ruby computes 2 minus 2. Since the result of that is 0, Ruby prints that to the terminal. But then when Ruby attempts to run line 2 and subtract one string from another string, we get an error message. As you can see, the error message takes place on line 2, and it says undefined method minus for 2 in quotes string, which is a fancy way of saying, guess what? Strings do not come with a subtraction capability. Yes, they come with a concatenation capability using the plus sign, but Ruby does not supply strings with any similar capability using a minus sign. So you cannot use a minus sign in conjunction with strings in Ruby. Now this indeed is an arbitrary decision. Technically, the creators of the Ruby language could have given and imbued strings with the capability to do some sort of minus mechanism. However, they did not, and therefore when you attempt to do so, you get an error message. So again, this is just another demonstration of how numbers and strings behave differently.